映画っていいもんだなと思ったのが、まあ他にたくさんありますよ。ありますけどね。
Akira Kurosawa never left a neat favorites list. What he left were traces, glimpses in his memoir, remarks in interviews, and a family-curated map of films he kept returning to. Follow those threads and you don't get a countdown, you get a pulse. Chaplin's Grace Under Hunger, expressionist streets where shadows think, horizons that hold a community together, bruised compassion on the roadside, grandeur that still feels human, and everyday stakes that break your heart in silence.
映画っていうのはその世界の広場みたいなものでさ、スクリーンを見てね、いろんな国の人の生活を見てね。
These aren't trivia answers. They're blueprints for the wind, rain, and stillness he put on screen. Watch closely and you'll see how each title slips into his camera moves, his pauses, his storms. And stay with us to the end, because the final film might be as close as Kurosawa ever came to calling cinema perfect. Number 6. The Gold Rush, 1925. At 15, Kurosawa fell for Chaplin the way you learn a language, by feeling it first. The Gold Rush makes you laugh at a man boiling his own shoe, and then, a beat later, lets the ache arrive. That whiplash taught him a lesson he never unlearned. In cinema, movement is meaning. The shuffle, the stumble, the sidelong glance, silent grammar that carries truth without a word. He writes in his memoir about devouring Chaplin as a teenager, inhaling silent-era craft, at the exact age when your sense of feeling becomes your sense of form. Years later, he built whole sequences on that idea, bodies speaking before dialogue, timing doing the storytelling. You can feel it in the kinetic swells of Seven Samurai, crowds arranged like chords, action shaped as emotion, where motion and weather become characters rather than noise. You can feel Chaplin's humanism resurfacing in Ikiru, where dry humor slips through despair and dignity holds together with thread. Even his wide frames of loneliness echo Chaplin's tiny silhouette against indifferent space, visual solitude that turns setting into fate. For Kurosawa, Chaplin wasn't just a comedian, he was a compass proving that the heart leads and the mind follows. No wonder The Gold Rush is among the works he repeatedly praised and revisited. If Chaplin taught him how feeling rides on motion, the next film taught him how a mind can bend the world around it. Number 5. Das Kabinett des Dr. Caligari, 1920. He first met terror as design. Alleys kinked like broken bones, windows slashed on the diagonal, shadows with intent. Caligari didn't imitate life, it externalized it, proving that decor, angle, and painted light can project a mind onto the world. This is German Expressionism at its source, inner states made visible through studio-built distortion and mood, cinema as architecture of the subconscious rather than a mirror of the street. In Kurosawa's hands, the lesson becomes method. Weather and buildings start speaking the feelings characters can't. Fog rolls like fate across the volcanic emptiness of Throne of Blood. Corridors narrow and accuse in the bad sleep well. In Rashomon, perception fractures until truth itself becomes a contested landscape. Even a century on, Caligari reads like a blueprint for his visual psychology. The tilted frame that moralizes, the set that corners a soul, the shadow that indicts before any dialogue. Watch Kurosawa's winds and walls. They are Expressionism reforged. Design not as decoration, but as destiny. If Expressionism taught him to bend reality, John Ford taught him how to hold it steady, and how composition can be a form of character. Number 4. My Darling Clementine, 1946. Kurosawa didn't just admire John Ford, he oriented himself by him. He called Ford really great, the kind of director he wanted to be when he grew old, and My Darling Clementine shows why. Horizons that hold a town together, a pause that says more than a speech, men measured not by pose, but by bearing. Ford's frames breathe, the camera waits, then lets action bloom inside a geometry of doors, porches, and sky. Kurosawa kept that grammar. In Seven Samurai, the village is drawn like a moral map. Storms gather, then stillness, then the rush. In Ikiru, dignity is a quiet posture at a playground swing. The point isn't the cowboy myth, it's how space shapes character, and how restraint builds weight. The Ford sentiment is on record. Kurosawa said it with the fervor of a student speaking about a teacher, and Clementine appears on the curated Kurosawa's 100, the one film per director inventory assembled from family conversations and notes. Different continents, same gaze. Composition as morality. Before Kurosawa built his own horizons, he learned to stand inside Fords. From America's open skies to Italy's dusty roads, the next lesson is mercy without sentiment, and music that bleeds. Number 3. La Strada, 1954. Before he trusted sermons, he trusted a melody. La Strada meets you with a trumpet line that feels like a hand on the shoulder. Plain, insistent, impossible to ignore. Fellini's fable lets tenderness and cruelty share the same road. Gelsomina's wonder scraping against Zampano's brute armor. Backlot dust turning into myth. What it gave Kurosawa wasn't circus color, but temperature. How to hold pity inside roughness, to let a glance both forgive and condemn. Critics often call the film a hinge where neorealism blooms into allegory without losing its human pulse. That blend of despair and mercy is the wavelength Kurosawa kept tuning to. He learned something else. Music as bloodstream. Nino Rota's plaintive motif doesn't decorate scenes. It carries meaning when words fail, returning like memory until it hurts. Decades later, Kurosawa would choreograph feeling with score and silence trading places, allowing music to reveal a soul that dialogue can only circle. Look at his Doctors and Drifters, The Wounded Men of Drunken Angel, The Guardians of Redbeard, filmed not as case studies but as lives. It makes sense that La Strada appears on the curated list of films he cherished. It explains why his own stories keep choosing mercy over verdicts. Compassion is intimate, scale is awe. The next film taught him that the widest frame can still hold a human pulse. Number 2. Ben-Hur, 1959. Epic can be empty. William Wyler proved it didn't have to be. Ben-Hur surrounds you with marble, dust, and the thunder of wheels. Yet what lingers is the gaze, frames that hold multiple lives in focus long enough for their feelings to collide. Wyler's restraint and deep, legible staging make spectacle feel human. Long takes that witness rather than grandstand. A camera that lets moral pressure build inside the shot. Photographed in MGM Camera 65, later branded Ultra Panavision 70, the film's width isn't decoration, it's responsibility. You read faces across a stadium, see loyalties and doubts coexist in a single composition, and understand that the chariot isn't merely speed, but judgment. Kurosawa kept that grammar of space. When high and low stacks power and panic within one room, or when Ikiru lets stillness do the hurting, you can feel the same belief that scale should carry dignity, not drown it. That's why Ben-Hur belongs on the family-curated map of pictures he treasured. The counterweight to his storms and swordplay, the reminder that size can serve soul. If the frame can hold a world, it must also hold a heart. Strip away the sets and the crowds. What remains? A man, his child, and a city that judges them by whether a bicycle is found. Number 1. Bicycle Thieves, 1948. Kurosawa's cinema keeps returning to small stakes that feel immense. The price of a meal, the weight of a job, and Bicycle Thieves is that feeling made pure. Vittorio De Sica lowers cinema to street height, non-actors, daylight, a camera that walks beside a father and son until errands turn into a crisis of self. The plot is thin by design, a bicycle stolen, a livelihood slipping, but the frame is full. Faces read like landscapes, crowds turn to weather, and morality arrives without speeches. This was Italian Neorealism's quiet dare. Put truth before adornment, let the city testify, trust that compassion can hurt more than violence. You see why Kurosawa kept this film close. In Ikiru, dignity is carved out of routine. In his wides, ordinary space becomes a moral arena. The same humanist charge De Sica locates on Rome's sidewalks. And that ending, no catharsis, only a father's shame, and a small hand finding his, lands like a verdict you give yourself. It isn't despair, it's recognition. Bicycle Thieves endures as a landmark of humanist filmmaking and a key text of neorealism, vast without ever leaving the ground, and it earns its place on the curated map of films he cherished. If one work grazes the word perfect in Kurosawa's private vocabulary, this may be it. In the end, these films aren't a checklist. They're a pulse running through Kurosawa's work. Chaplin's movement, Vinay's angles, Ford's horizons, Fellini's pity, Wyler's restraint, De Sica's streets. He believed cinema should touch the heart first and let the mind follow. Watch his frames and you can feel that creed working shot by shot. If this reframed how you see his movies, tell us which one stayed with you and why. We'll be back to show where these echoes live, beat for beat, inside his greatest scenes.